generation, which makes I live in Ward 6 and I work in Ward 1, and I have a condition that makes it impossible for me to drive and puts me in the majority of people with disabilities that don't own a car or operate a car, and that's something that among other things, we advocate for making sure that people can get around the city in a safe, accessible, reliable, and affordable way. Yeah, that's me. I'll pass it over to Kelly. And Kelly, do you want to do a quick intro and pass it on to the next?
Sure. Kelly MAAC, a DC resident, MAAC member. I am a longtime wheelchair user, and I also am a non-driver, and I live in Ward 3. And I will pass it on to, I think I saw Ra on here.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm here. I'm Ra Amin. I am ANC Commissioner in 5B04, which is the Brooklyn area. As I'm also a member of the ANC Vision Zero Caucus, and this year I vice chair the Transportation Planning Board's Citizens Advisory Committee. And I'm always happy to attend MAAC's meetings. And I am going to pass to, I hope I pronounced it right, Lakeisha? Lakeisha.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lakeisha Love Pettis. I'm the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for DDOT. And I'm going to pass it to Zach.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Zach Smith, DDOT Liaison to the MAAC. And who hasn't gone?
I can go for Hi, I'm Lindsay Hill. I'm with Destination DC. I'm our Director of Visitor Experience. Destination DC is the tourism board for Washington, DC. I lead our accessibility task force. So I'm here really just to listen today, and thanks for letting me join.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Welcome, Lindsay. Cool. And I think Neo's our last. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Welcome, Lindsay. And Neo is in the background helping run things. So we'll table our approval of February minutes for when we have quorum, but I think we can go ahead and just jump into the agenda. So just a couple of quick announcements, and this is always for anyone to jump in as well. So there was a teach-in for transportation equity. This was an event where Peter Steppen, who's with the Office of Disability Rights, made a presentation about the Olmsted Plan, and there were some notable mentions in that plan of our work with of their work with DDOT on the ADA transition plan, but especially with sidewalks. It was kind of a great convening. It was hosted at Smarter Growth America, just focused on kind of the ability for people with disabilities to move around the district safely. It was a great event. I'm hoping that Peter can join on future MAAC calls. He's joined in the past, and that's been great. That was a readout from the transportation equity teach-in. The Long Bridge project, that is a project. It's primarily a rail project. So there's going to be the Long Bridge is a choke point for rail, for both freight and passenger rail, that connects DC and Virginia. And they're going to double the capacity of this. This is a massive project. So the Virginia Passenger Railway Authority, I think it's called VPRA. They're the primary. They're the kind of the primary agency leading the initiative, and DDOT's part of this as well. But kind of the thing that affects us is that there are also going to be some pedestrian bridges. There are two, one longer one that connects East Potomac Park and and Virginia, and the other that's going to cross Main Avenue. Both of them will be ADA accessible, and I just provided some kind of stronger commentary on kind of what it really means to be ADA accessible, and kind of not just checking boxes. But yeah, that was a good meeting as well. There will be future community meetings, so and I'll make announcements of that. People are always welcome to join any of these things. And those are kind of two quick announcements. Nao, can you give an update on our recruitment efforts?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to stay off camera just so everything doesn't slow down. So we have printed off a couple of flyers and have posted them at the Starbucks Hard of Hearing Deaf community on 8th Street, at Gallaudet, and at the Peregrine coffee shop, also by Gallaudet. In addition, we've posted at a couple of universities, American U while I was there for an event, and at Gallaudet. And then we've also posted at Ward 5, 7, and 8 community centers, the YMCA and Ward 5, and then the library in Ward 8, and then the Miriam McLeod Bethune Community Center as well. So in addition to posting, we've also reached out to ANC members of Wards 5, 7, and 8. We have yet to hear back, but I am hopeful that we will at least receive some sort of communications from individuals, especially from our ANC reps, to see if they know of any individuals who are community members who would be interested in joining our accessibility advisory council. I've also, I was going to add this, but I also have started our Blue Sky account. So already starting to connect with a couple of individuals on there. Some of them are already active in the biking community, but hoping that that will be a really good way for us to expand our reach with individuals, like-minded individuals, and hopefully get people to come join us. But if you know of anyone, please feel free to forward their information to me, or we also have a form that we can have individuals complete. But I think it's a really good opportunity for them to at least come to our meeting, get a chance to meet us and learn more about the different programmings that we do and the amazing guests that we have joining our meetings. So thank you again. Perfect.
Great. Thanks so much, Nao. And yeah, just as a reminder, we're still looking to fill, we still have openings. We still have 2 more seats. We'd love to find folks. We haven't had someone who has kind of personal experience with hearing challenges, people of the kind of hard of hearing and deaf community. That would be great representation. We just don't have it. That would be fantastic. And also kind of more geographic representation as well. We're kind of Ward 6 heavy, and kind of Northwest, Southwest heavy too. So Northeast and Southeast, we're kind of definitely would love to have some representation. So yeah, if folks know people that are kind of, basically the main criteria is just like kind of a deep understanding of issues facing the people with disabilities in the district, living in the district, and just having a deep commitment to making this place better. Yeah, firsthand experience is fantastic, but not necessary, not strictly necessary, but just kind of the deeper understanding, the better. So yeah, that's on the recruitment side, but kind of the main, so we've got some internal business, but kind of the main thing, or yeah, the agenda, thanks for putting that in the chat. Nao, there's some links in here too, so feel free to click on the links. But our kind of main guest for today is the Director of For-Hire Vehicles, Director Jonathan Rogers. We really appreciate you coming. We've had some concerns, but I'll turn it over to you. So one, welcome, thanks for coming, and I'll turn it over to you, and we can get started with a good conversation.
Thanks so much, Kartik. It's great to be here. I appreciate the outreach and the invite. I don't think this is my first MAAC meeting, but it's my first meeting from DFHV, and definitely as DFHV director. But I've worked with the MAAC from DDOT and probably the deputy mayor's office after that. But yeah, thanks again for having me. Would it be all right if we do these in reverse order, talking about the MAAC's resolution first, because I think that's a bigger picture topic?
Yes, absolutely. And like we generally have like a good kind of conversational style. So here where like, if that's okay with you, like we'll just kind of pause and ask questions, and yeah, that's so, or maybe I should give folks background. So Naomi, who unfortunately isn't on the call, kind of brought this up. She had a particularly bad experience. And when she brought it up, kind of realized that other folks on the MAAC and many of our friends and neighbors have had similar experiences where there have not been available cabs in times and places that are kind of really sensitive and important. So we passed a resolution, just kind of reinforcing reinforcing and redoubling kind of our statements that, hey, we really need 24/7 availability. This is not only the law, but it's also just kind of for people with disabilities, it's super important to be able to get around. So yeah, so maybe Nao, can you bring that resolution up, and then Jonathan, take it away.
Sure. I have a copy of it as well.
Okay.
Which I could share, but I guess while it's being pulled up, I can say in general we are in alignment with the need that you're describing, and we hear it loud and clear. We work pretty closely with our own accessibility advisory committee that exists specifically to advise DFHV on these matters. I think there's even some overlap in membership with the MAAC, so it's definitely something that's completely on our radar. Maybe I can just share. Am I allowed to share?
You should be able to share, or maybe. Yeah, you can go ahead and share yourself if you'd like. It's so basically to the left, there's a hand icon and there's a smiley face icon. It's actually the one in between those two. And if you, it's
somehow slipped a tab, maybe. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Okay. You're able to see.
Yeah.
Then okay, yeah. So you have some specifics laid out here again, which I think our agency equally cares about and prioritizes, and we're in alignment on the policy behind these statements. So I guess I want to say too, I know that the law matters a lot, and we had a little bit of back and forth over email where we have our general counsel's office just confirming the interpretation. I think that it may have been Kelly Mack who shared, some citations. And so I, definitely want to make sure we're all reading wherever, whether it's federal law, local law, where those things are. But the flip side of that to me is that it doesn't really change my commitment or focus on this issue one way or another, because I agree that this WAV service is critically important. And so we're already working and have been on improving it with the taxi sector in specific. But throughout the for-hire industry, I think it's really important. And so we have definitely observed and heard about the specific pain point in the late night and evening hours, pretty much from 6 p.m. even basically evening, all through the late night hours. There is a lack of, there's less taxi service in general during that time for sure, but definitely you can see the WAV service in particular is severely lacking. And so I do think we can commit to a formal audit of that to just make sure we're, with specifically really quantifying those figures, working with our companies. It's readily available for us to see when trips are occurring, but I think we can do a bit more work with them to see like who is on duty if that kind of information can be quantified with our taxi operators. So that doesn't sound like a heavy lift to me. And then I think I like the bullet point a lot about enforceable minimum requirements for coverage. I'm not sure if folks saw any of our performance oversight hearing a week or two ago with council, but I shared my opinion, and I think Council Chair Nadeau is chair of the committee, is somewhat receptive to the fact that from what I've heard, the most important sort of metric of performance here can really be boiled down to wait time. Like when a WAV is requested, how long is the customer waiting for that service to arrive? And we can compare that to the average we see for non-WAV trips that are dispatched. And to me, that's really what we're looking to improve upon. And it's not quite as important what percentage of their fleet happens to be WAV or not. I think we've seen there are some companies today that meet that 20% requirement and do very little WAV service. And then somewhat counterintuitively, there are companies that actually don't meet the 20% requirement, but are providing more trips than any other taxi company, or even the much larger ride share, private TNCs, Uber and Lyft, that type of thing. So to me, I think that requirement's just aimed in the wrong place. And I would like to see a metric of wait time be measured, and that's what I think we should hold the companies accountable to. Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, feel free. And actually, just in general, like the more. So Kelly, I'll let you lead off. Like kind of the more conversational we can keep this, the better. But yeah, go for it, Kelly. I know, so Kelly's our resident expert. She's kind of studied this and knows a ton about this this particular case.
Yeah, I would say that another really important metric is trips fulfilled versus unfulfilled. And we need to be able to discern what ones are unfulfilled because of lack of cab service versus the customer needing to cancel. And why I say this is because I've been tracking my cab service for the last 5 years, and I have a 70% failure rate. Well, I am guessing that the cab companies would say, I cancel. And that is not true. I cancel when they don't show up and when I have to get some other transportation. And so I think it's really important that we drill down to that stat, because sure, wait time is great, but showing up is the fundamental.
Yeah, I agree. To me, they're sort of interlinked though, right? Like to your point, if they argue they did show up, but it took an hour or an hour longer than estimated, I feel like that's part of how one would have to define a cancellation, or just the quality of their service, I guess. Like if a taxi company says, well, we sent a driver, but we told the customer a driver's not available for 45 minutes. To me, that's where I like seeing, well, what is the comparable benchmark with non-WAV service to measure if that 45 minutes is fair or equitable or acceptable.
I think we need both, because I've had companies say, oh, we sent someone, they didn't tell me, but I had canceled. And I don't know that they really did, because why would they send someone to a canceled trip? So I don't really believe that. But, I think that there is some manipulation of facts that occurs that needs to be verified by the customers.
Yep. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'll get into a bit of what we've learned in our pilot efforts after this, but some of those issues have been wrestled with a bit in the pilot because the taxi companies bring up sort of complications for verifying some of those facts as well. So it's a little easier said than done, I think, but I think we agree on what's important to measure to really accurately quantify like what's happening here and when is a trip fulfilled. When was it sort of, I don't know, the customer's prerogative to cancel versus they really weren't truly offered, the service that was requested. So they were forced to cancel, maybe you could say something along that line. So yeah, I think we're in agreement that there are more useful ways to measure what's happening, and holding the companies accountable. I'll be 100% honest, is sort of a philosophical struggle for me, and I think the agency, where even today, for example, where we know some of the companies don't meet that 20% fleet requirement, punishing them into compliance is difficult. Whether that, if there are fines, something along that nature, or the most clear-cut option we have is to, that sort of failure to meet requirements jeopardizes their operating authority. And of course, revoking their operating authority, suspending their operating authority doesn't let them provide any service at all. And so we don't, that I don't know how useful that action would be in terms of actually providing the mobility and the accessible transportation we all care about.
Let me ask one question about enforcement. Have you sent any stern letters?
No, probably not.
So it seems like there is some room for enforcement, right? Like,
I mean, if the sort of like warnings constitute, in your opinion, as enforcement, we can definitely do that. I think the
offer to collaborate on a plan to get there.
Yeah,
And,
that's
there are many levels of enforcement before you revoke a license.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that's the collaboration is definitely where we've been investing more of our time. So that the companies are all well aware. Like if we were to send a letter, it wouldn't be informing them of anything new. We've actually had some pretty good conversations you might have been there actually on the AAC when we had some of the company representatives like explaining a bit of, the operational aspects and like the economics of the vehicles and sort of what their drivers, how they prefer if left to their own devices, the hours they prefer to work and those sorts of things. And that was kind of in the context of our 1.0 pilot. So I guess my point is that they're aware of the requirement, and that's really what drove our efforts in the pilot program, which I know wasn't satisfactory for you, Kelly, and probably others. But that's I think my best example of where we're attempting to help them meet the requirements and to provide more of that WAV service. And I will summarize, what we took from that pilot and where we're headed with the second iteration, which might be the final iteration in that format anyway, given the budget climate that we're facing. So I'll get into more of that. I like this idea too of a public real-time tracking system. I think we've actually set up some of the infrastructure on that would be necessary through the hotline, which I know wasn't popular either, but it actually kind of, built the framework to query where these WAVs are at any given time. And so I think we've actually talked about, even though we're not using the hotline anymore as part of a pilot, that like that tool should still be available if people want to click on our website and see, where the closest WAV is, according to the data. So I think that's something we can also achieve. And we can, put these things into, an official plan with benchmarks as requested. So I'm happy to do that. I can try to share now some slides we put together, which will go more to that.
If you want me to.
Yeah, either way, you can if you want.
Actually.
And these will get into the pilot, but also just provide some broader context, I think, about how I look at accessible transportation in the district, and how it narrows down into for-hire vehicles. It took me a minute to realize there's an option for tabs within Chrome versus other windows.
Oh
in the
yeah,
shared thing.
Microsoft Edge tab. Oh, that is
We're behind the times at the DC government with just Microsoft Teams, so we don't use Google Meet as much.
So you can show the Chrome tab, the window, or the entire screen.
Yeah, I have it open in PowerPoint. Let me see.
So if you come back to our current Google Meet window,
Yes.
So there's a hand icon, a smiley face icon, and then right in between there's a present now.
Yes.
So once you click on present now, there's Chrome tab, window, and entire screen. You may want to click on window and then click on PowerPoint and then click on share, and that will let you share.
For some reason is not showing. Let me just see. Screen one. Nope. Maybe Jonathan, you should try. Oh, there you go. You did it.
Just need to get it in. Hopefully the slideshow mode works.
Yep, it should. If you had shift F5. There
Oh,
we go.
so you could only do it from
Okay.
Microsoft Edge or Chrome.
Then I guess I have to.
Then you have to drive yourself.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So you can see the title of our slide deck here.
Yep.
So I'll give again just some broader context. I think we can look at WAV data for January 2025 just as kind of a sample to see what trips look like, and then we have some data and some mapping on the geographic distribution of trips and demand for WAV service. Kind of think we might have talked about these metrics already, and then I'll get into the pilots, and then we just have a reminder about the next AAC meeting if anyone would like to attend that as well. So this is kind of what I reminded council of in our oversight hearing, is that the taxi market share, sort of the number of trips, the share of trips that they're providing in the for-hire market is down to 5% of the industry. So the other 95% are the private ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft and a few others. But really the taxis continue to decline in their sort of size and the service they offer in the first place. Yet they're subject to the vast majority of all the regulations we have in the for-hire industry. There are many examples of rules that the taxis have to follow that the much larger TNCs or rideshare companies don't have to follow. And that's actually, I think, important for something like WAV service, when we're hoping, again, to have accessible transportation in the district and in the region, but we only require it of a small population of the for-hire industry. I'm sure you're all aware of Metro bus and rail options, and I think their intention to be accessible. But of course, where that isn't possible for people, Metro Access is the paratransit supplement to that. And then, of course, you're probably aware that DFHV kind of has a sister program to Metro Access, which is Transport DC. And those are, Transport DC is only for trips within the district. It's more on demand, I would say, than Metro Access. It's private. And so there's a $7 flat fee for our Transport DC trips. And then there's a cap of trips per month unless you're using it for dialysis treatment. But Transport DC does about 100,000 trips in 2024. And then 12,000 of those trips were WAV trips. So just Transport DC alone, and that you hopefully know that all those trips are provided by taxi companies. So within that program, they're actually doing a lot of WAV service. Outside of that, there's another 11,000 trips that I think is kind of the focus of the resolution that the MAAC shared with us, and maybe some of our conversations, that these are what I would call sort of the market rate, just regular old taxi trips that charge the regular metered fare, and are just requested directly from taxi companies. And so that's the red sliver in the pie chart here. It's that little 5% of what the taxis are able to do for the whole industry, and then outside of what they're doing in Transport DC, this is what is left over. But with Transport DC and other taxi WAV trips combined, they did at least 23,000 trips in 2024. So I think that's significant.
Do you know how many TNC wave trips there were?
Not off the top of my head. I think we do have a number.
TNC data by legislation, where it's exempt from FOIA and we can't share it. And that's one of the challenges that we.
But you had a slide earlier about TNC versus taxi.
So the number of trips.
That's,
so,
yeah.
So what exactly?
Right.
Yeah. What exactly?
Market share.
Yeah. So exactly what? Because obviously, if we want to solve this problem, TNCs need to be part of this picture, and I know they're subject to different regulation or lighter regulation. But what exactly can we not compel them to do anything? Do they have no requirements for reporting?
Well, reporting. So we get mostly aggregated data. We do have information on their WAV service. I said in the council hearing, so I'll repeat it here, that the taxi, looking at maybe this slide is more relevant, but the taxi service, despite the fact they're only 5% of the overall market, they're doing up to half of all the WAV service we're aware of in the entire market. So I would say, doing more than their fair share, and I'm not saying they're doing enough to meet, everyone's demands, especially in this group, but I think they're doing a better job than the TNCs are. And to my knowledge, the requirement in law for the actual service for TNCs is simply that they need to offer it, and it doesn't get more specific than that. And so they often outsource that to other, kind of fleet companies or even taxis in some case. But they don't, thinking about the resources available to companies of those size, and the number, the astronomical number of trips in general that they do compared to the taxi segment, it's almost, it's not even a drop in the bucket, their share of WAV trips of their, share of their overall trips. So I totally agree. And that's what I pretty heavily implied to council, is that the lack of the level playing field there, is an issue. And I'm not making excuses for the taxi companies, and we want them to not only meet the law, but actually provide, you know, the level of service that that meets people's needs. But I do think it's just a huge disparity, and that needs to be fixed. And that, you know, that's up to the legislative branch.
So there's some ability to I'm sorry, Faye. Just one thing. There's some ability to interpret what that says, though, like what offering actually means, right?
I suppose, and I'm not sure how, you know,
I
if
mean,
that battle's been fought before. But I, you know, I know their response would be, we do offer it. And again, no one's asking them, well, what's the wait time? What's your request versus fulfilled trip rate? I think they're probably content to say, you know, open the Uber app, you can request a WAV. So case closed.
We actually met with them. So that's why I raised my hand. A couple of things. TNC's Uber hires a fleet sharing VAV fleet company to offer VAV trips. So the VAV drivers that, that at least according to Uber, the VAV drivers that when you call an Uber app, when you select the VAV option, it's the drivers who come pick you up belong to a fleet company. So we reached out to Uber and we said, hey, how do you do it? We want to know so that we learn from you, right? Because we had no idea it's fleet sharing. Like they hire a fleet sharing company to provide the service, and that some of the, and it may be that that fleet sharing company also works with Metro Access, because Metro Access also works with fleet sharing companies for the VAV service, shuttle companies. So that's one thing. And at the second point I wanted to make, just escaped my mind. But yes, we reached out to Uber to ask about what they're doing. They didn't share a lot of their data with us. They're not required by law. So that's one of the things that also Director Rogers raised at our confirmation hearing, that, you know, the playing field is not level. Like, you know, we can't get the same level of data from TNCs.
Well, I'm interested to hear about the number of trips, because I have a lot better luck getting Uber than I do, and I know a lot of the Uber drivers now because of that, than I have ever with cab service. So I am interested in seeing that kind of trip disparity or difference, if there is one. And if you should consider adding all of the wave trips together, that is a non-insignificant number in 1 month. And I would dare to suggest that if people with disabilities felt like it was reliable and regular and accessible, that it would skyrocket. And I think that there is not that sense about transportation in DC from the cab companies. Maybe it's growing with Uber, but just putting that thought out there that there is a suppressed demand as well.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, I have a question for you. Maybe you or other folks or your friends who may live in Virginia and Maryland. Do you have any colleagues, friends, anyone who lives in other states with local jurisdictions, just to see how their experience has been? I'm asking because I reached out to Arlington, Alexandria, Montgomery County to see like if there are any specific percentage of VAV fleet in their regulations or law. And except for us, I think Arlington County is 1 every 10 taxi fleet must be WAV. And I wonder, like, how do they do it, right? Like, that's a part of the stuff, like part of some of the benchmarkings that we do. We reached out to others to see how they do it. And obviously, you know, you've been on the AAC calls where we talked about a centralized dispatch system. You know, what's the difference between like the district and other cities who do centralized dispatch, and or some of the other incentive structures that Director Rogers may get into later on. For instance, like coming up with like a a fund, like having a fund that we can constantly like say, okay, we're gonna pay drivers. Like if you're a VAV driver, this is your incentive. You get $10, you get $20 per trip. So go be a VAV driver. If you have a VAV, don't go to the airport to pick up, whatever, like passengers with luggage, like if 5 luggages. Go take this VAV trip because there's an incentive for it, right? So yes, so I just wonder what the experience of wheelchair passengers is in local jurisdictions that actually don't have that requirement in their law. Are they only use Metro Access or the TDC equivalent in local jurisdictions, or
The people that I've spoken to have said that they just don't have any service. And so they, I think there was one person that her husband drives and they have a private vehicle, so she doesn't get out much. So I'm just saying that this is a fundamental mobility issue for disabled people who do not drive.
Yes, 100%.
Hi, this is Naomi. I'm so sorry I joined late, especially because my incident was the inspiration for our resolution. Just to respond to the current topic, I don't know if you have any way to talk to anyone in New York City, local transportation, but I spend a lot of time in New York, and on every street, I see wheelchair accessible taxis. I can't go anywhere without seeing them. I haven't actually used one because my default is usually to use Uber in New York or DC. And I also have to say how much easier it is to get an Uber in New York than it is here. I mean, I was able to get an Uber in about 5 minutes, 5-minute wait time in my wheelchair in Times Square at midnight. And meanwhile, in DC, during the day, I often have to wait upwards of 20 minutes. So I know that New York is a bigger city, but clearly they're doing something differently to be able to have a lot more taxis and Ubers. And also, they have wheelchair accessible Lyft. I believe I've done that once or twice in New York and also Philadelphia. I'm wondering why other cities have wheelchair Lyft, but DC doesn't. Just as another option.
Those are good points. Thank you. Yes.
And also, I know that this might have been answered before I got on the call, but just like I was put in a very unsafe situation by the taxi companies. Yellow Cab and Royal Taxi both told me that they do not offer wheelchair accessible vehicles at night. Your chart that you're showing right now, there are very few instances, but there are some people who were able to get taxis at 10, 11, 1, and 4 a.m. So I don't know what happens. I'm not sure if you have any idea why they told me that, given that I believe they might be part of Transport DC. They should be following the requirements.
And just to speak up, I've been told that many, many times as well.
Are you saying taxi companies have said, like, it's a policy of theirs that they don't offer the service at certain times?
Yes. And then this led directly to me having to walk home from Union Station in my wheelchair at 1:30 in the morning by myself, solely because I could not get a taxi, even though they were supposed to have that option.
Could you let us know what time? Could you send us, because when we get complaints, we reach out to companies and we make sure that we look into it. So if you could just send me the information, I really would like to reach out to the companies to see whether they had it right.
It's on our letter, October 5th at 1:30 in the morning.
I will send that to you. I filed a complaint with the Department for Highway Vehicles, and it got dismissed without any sort of investigation.
We'll look into it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I also want to raise the concern I had that Naomi's complaint was dismissed without contacting her or seemingly any investigation. I want to raise that as a problem with the system because this is a serious incident and that should not have happened.
Thanks, Kelly.
And I want to kind of like boost that up even further, like in winter where like sidewalks aren't plowed properly and there's ice and I mean there's just and if you stay on for later down in the meeting, people without a car significantly have this time tax. It just takes longer to do anything. And if we can't even get like accessible vehicles, the wheelchair accessible vehicles, in these kind of, especially at night, sensitive times, like that's really, really, really bad. And the one recourse that we have is if it's not actually functional, then that's also super deeply problematic.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I would be very surprised to hear, like DFHV wouldn't use the word dismissed regarding the complaint. I know the process probably didn't lead to a satisfactory outcome, but just trying to clarify that we wouldn't intentionally sort of discredit the complaint. To some of your points, we may not have been able to hold the company accountable in a way that results in immediate improvement, but certainly it's not our standard or policy or procedure or anything like that to invalidate a complaint like that. There should have been, and I hope there was, an investigation. Maybe there was a lack of follow-up and communication about that, but it's a valid complaint and one that should have been investigated. So I'm hoping that's the case, and I can definitely follow up to see what record we have of that. Despite the fact that that doesn't mean the incident didn't happen or get you home more safely. So I do apologize for that in general. Yeah, I think we just covered a lot, but I don't dispute much of what was said. So I guess I'll just return to, and I think it's on the same topic here of where we were in the slides, which I think confirms like what we're hearing, and you can see the lack of, this is actual trips. So to Kelly's point, that's not the same thing exactly as demand. So, likely there's less demand overnight than there is in the middle of the day. But you can see the trips falling off here as you get later into the night. We actually visited Yellow Cab, for example, not long ago, and they were sort of giving us a live look at their dispatch board and TDC trip requests coming in and other WAV trip requests coming in. And it appeared to us that they were fulfilling those requests pretty much as soon as they were coming in, definitely at the same pace as non-WAV requests. But again, that was like really evident probably from 10 a.m. to somewhere in the afternoon, where that like predictable peak of demand is. And they were very clear with us that the average taxi driver, regardless of if they drive a WAV or not, they pretty much think of their tour of duty as like 9 to 5. And so that's why in a couple instances we've really focused at, okay, like getting toward 5 and 6 p.m. and then after that, like how are we going to meet that demand and to fill that gap, because that's sort of the natural preference of the drivers out there is they want to clock out at 5 p.m. or so. So that kind of aligns with certainly this drop off in WAV service. And I think this January data, like I said, is pretty representative, where maybe Kelly said it again, like this is a non-insignificant number of trips that are happening. And it's similar to that overall pie chart I showed where, there's TDC trips happening that are WAV and non-WAV. 12% of the TDC trips were in WAVs. Okay, and so this is another way to look at the data we collect, thinking about, you know, how this would inform like requirements like the percentage of WAVs in fleet or wait time. And this is just a heat map of pickup and drop off activity from several months in 2024. And so we see concentrations around medical campuses. You know, you can see the Washington Hospital Center there, and I think perhaps GW and maybe even Sibley out further west. Then there's some activity up in Northeast in Ward 5, like New York Ave, Rhode Island Ave. So again, these are kind of I want to say natural or like more common areas where I think there is a concentration of requests and rides fulfilled. And so when requests come from further out in the periphery of the district, there's sort of a natural longer wait time that results from the fact that they're sort of on duty and clustering in some of these areas on average. So that, you know, is sort of hard, I guess, just a challenge of service is going to be faster, more likely, the closer you are to sort of these clusters of activity, if left to its own devices. And then probably hopefully getting toward the end here, because I don't want to monopolize things, but this is a little side-by-side of our WAV 1.0 pilot and where we're headed with the 2.0. So I think we did it for about 6 months, the 1.0. Not on here. It does mention the hotline. So, you know, some of you might be familiar. Our thought with the hotline was, wouldn't it be great instead of customers having to take their chances and calling individual taxi companies to actually call one number and have that number inform them of the closest WAV that we're able to see, still allow you to, you know, choose if you have a preference of one company, but at least give the information that you know, company X has the closest WAV. Would you like to be connected? And so that was kind of the hotline aspect of it. I think what I've taken away from that is if that didn't result in a fast trip, it kind of felt like an extra step even, or sort of false hope being offered. And also that some of our customers simply have some brand loyalty and trust in specific providers. And so they want to use VIP, you know, regardless, just because they've had success with them in the past. So they really don't, it's really kind of irrelevant to what else might be out there. And they don't need the hotline to tell them that Transco has a closer vehicle, for example. So learned that because of those reasons, the hotline, it really didn't generate very many calls. You know, there were some days where there was only one call. So we're not really moving forward with that. But like I said, if the function of it is useful, we do want to keep that alive. And yeah, I think actually could build towards sort of like a dashboard concept or just like a real time, you know, display of where WAVs are driving around the district at any given time. The other part of the 1.0 pilot was we wanted to incentivize drivers to be on duty, especially when they otherwise wouldn't be. And so we had the $35 per hour incentive to, you know, make it that much more lucrative and attractive for drivers to be available in their WAVs. So that, like, over in the beginning, we may have attracted more drivers, but I think over the course of the pilot, it really resulted in about 6 new drivers that participated, which is obviously less than we were hoping. We heard feedback from them that actually, because we were tracking only what was coming through the hotline, which wasn't a lot, the drivers like to be active. So even with that $35 per hour extra incentive, they weren't content to be on duty and just sort of sit idle and collect that income. So they were actually doing WAV trips for some of our other programs like Vets Rides and My Rides. These are for specific populations that some of our sister agencies set up these programs through DFHV. So yeah, they don't enjoy, I guess, being on duty and sort of required to be available for a program like this if they're not seeing the requests come through. So that was not something we predicted, I guess. And then you can see, so yeah, total 256 calls to the hotline with 149 unique callers and the budget allocated there. And so after pretty lengthy conversations with the taxi providers, we really tried to get them to tell us once again directly, like, what do you think would attract more drivers, improve this service? And so we sort of did a more nuanced version of the driver payment incentives, where specifically from 6 p.m. to midnight, they will have this $25 an hour flat rate bonus. But for completed trips, they'll get back up to that 35, a $10 trip completion incentive.
Question about that incentive: how are you confirming that it is a wheelchair using customer and that they are satisfied with their service?
That is a great question, and that's what I was actually alluding to earlier, where some of the companies bring up, potential complications with having a foolproof way to confirm, because anyone can call them and say they want a WAV, and we don't want to be paying, from our side, we're not trying to pay them this incentive if they're not actually serving people in wheelchairs. And so some companies, I think, described a process for that they claim is easier than others. Did you want to jump in, Faye? You're muted.
When they get a call, that's what they told us. The dispatchers ask, can you transfer? Like, do you have a foldable wheelchair? And so if you don't, or if you don't understand, then that means you actually are not on a wheelchair and you're just calling a WAV.
I actually mean post trip, because I'll say I don't think there's many people out there who are calling for waves without needing one. Like, I laugh when they say, "Do you really need one?" I've been asked that. Because I don't know that other people know that they exist and want to order them because they think riding in a wheelchair accessible vehicle is super cool. Like, I don't think that's happening. So I'm more worried about the post. Like, I have an order, they don't come, they say they come, they get an incentive despite not giving me service. That's what I'm worried about.
Oh, I see.
I'm worried about paying them money for no service. And that is my concern, that we're boosting the taxi companies with no discernible improvement in wheelchair accessible service.
Yeah, and for that, in this instance, they would have to be committing total fraud, because we would need to see a trip record, like show us, and we have the GPS data, so they would be totally faking a trip with no passenger at all.
How did that happen?
Yeah, it's possible, and then I think we're able to confirm and sort of, we're actually in general investing in more of a secret shopper program. To have basically undercover passengers.
That's what I'm talking about, because I've had trips faked, or I've had them say I wasn't in a place that I was, despite having a witness. And so I'm very distrustful after these experiences.
Yep, and we've definitely talked with that in the context of the pilot, like the point raised earlier about what's a cancellation. Because we've heard, sometimes a driver will be overly impatient and say, well, yeah, I went to the address, but the person never came out. And so after X minutes, I canceled the trip. And we don't want that happening when it's not appropriate, obviously. So especially if they're earning some sort of extra incentive. And so that's where the intention is, the completed trip incentive gets to that a bit more than just saying, hey, you get $35 an hour no matter what happens. and actually, hopefully, honestly completing this trip. And that's when you get the reward of the extra $10 instead of just the flat $35.
For example, in the Yellow Cab app, which I've used to sometimes get a trip, there should be like a confirmation afterwards. Kelly, like, did you have a good trip and arrive at your destination? And I could just hit a button. It's really easy. You know, I know programming isn't that easy. I'm just saying, like, I think that there's a way that after the trip, have the customer say thumbs up.
Yeah, I do think that would be easy enough for some of the operators. It's actually making me think of one of these subsidies down here is a dispatch subsidy. So most of the drivers at any given company, for them to be on dispatch in the first place, they pay a dispatch fee, and so we would be using our grant dollars to cover that and remove that, you know, disincentive for drivers to participate. But I've often talked about in our overall Title 31 rewrite, increasing the requirement of taxi companies to be dispatchable, you know, and that would be not just inferior telephone style dispatch, like what, you know, why don't you have more of a digital version of that, which is an option for them already. So, because to me, you know, a point I try to make to people often is that people who are requesting WAVs need dispatchability, that you're not sitting out on the street hoping a WAV drives by trying to do a street hail.
I mean,
So
it's like catching a Yeti in a bottle, I'll tell you.
exactly.
And I'm too short, even if there were one coming around the corner, I'm too short and can't raise my arm for anyone to notice me. So
Well, so actually, that happened to me once. Or I was like at a bus stop, but the bus was taking a while. And a taxi did pull over. Unfortunately, I don't remember which company it was, but I have a pretty standard power wheelchair, and I got in the car, and they told me my wheelchair was too big. Like they couldn't shut the back of the taxi, and I was really confused. But I got out anyway because they couldn't shut the door. But like that was my one incident where
Okay.
I just was able to get one on the street, but then I wasn't able to actually ride it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's not good either. Yeah, I actually haven't heard of that. You know, most of the WAV taxis, it seems like the standards work out for most, you know, wheelchair and devices and things. But that's good to know. But yeah, you know, my point there are definitely companies and drivers who sort of shy away from dispatch altogether. And to me, that's not in their, it's definitely not in their own interest in terms of their own income. But for whatever reason, there is a population of drivers that prefers, you know, to sit at taxi stands and not be on an app or even available for telephone dispatch. And that doesn't benefit our purpose here for accessibility. And so that's kind of something I have in my sights to correct, because it doesn't sit well with me. Go ahead, Faye.
Kelly, I think you raised a very good point about drivers canceling or not showing up. And we do get breadcrumb data and just a GPS minute by minute data from the taxis. And so when we, like tomorrow when we go back to the office, I want to follow up with the person who like works at or is responsible for this, the analyst who's looking at the WAF 2.0 data. Once companies started to offer service, I'll speak with them. We'll speak with them to see if they can look at actually for every trip, or maybe like do a sample just to see if you know, say if we get like, I don't know, like 200, like 20, 50, 100 trips, no problem. We can actually look at pickup drop-off locations to see if actually the trip actually happened. Because if they cancel on their DTS, we can see on our end whether like the trip was canceled or where the pickup drop-off was. And I say this because it's actually, as a passenger, it happened to me a few times. And so I was able to also file a complaint with DHB. So like, I know that like we look into these things, and we'll bring it up to our analyst who will be working on this WAF 2.0 pilot, just to see whether we can spot check maybe at the beginning all of them. And then as the program progresses, we just like do a few every day just to see how it works. I would say, I think you're spot on. Companies also mentioned this at the beginning. We wanted to offer like an incentive for canceled trips. But then companies actually said, no, passengers don't cancel. Sometimes drivers cancel. I think Transco actually mentioned it. So, you know, you're spot on, and we will definitely look into this for the WAF 2.0.
That's great. And I think a secret shopper program is a great idea. And I know of a nonprofit organization that does that on various disability areas, if you're interested in having a partner who's knowledgeable and experienced in that kind of thing.
And we also, we're definitely interested. I think we already picked, I think it's been through the procurement process, but we also mentioned this at AAC, that if anyone is interested in being a secret shopper, we can connect them with the consultant that we hired, so that you can actually be one of the secret shoppers. We can certainly do that. We mentioned this to the AAC last month when we had our meeting. So just let us know, and we'll connect you with the consultant who's doing the secret shopper program or initiative.
I would volunteer, but I think they're well known, or I'm probably well known to them. So not much of a
Probably so.
I could try.
Yeah. We actually did this a year ago, but the contractor we got wasn't good at doing the job, and so it kind of fell through and we had to start over. But like Faye said, we're happy to do it sort of informally. I know I've done 3 trips now with Olivia Norman, who's on the AAC and has a service animal. By some miracle, that we took a taxi ride, an Uber ride, and a Lyft ride, and all of them were very friendly and, you know, welcomed her service animal into the.
You should have bought a lottery ticket that day.
Yeah.
I was like, we're wasting our time, but they all took us to our destination. Okay, I'm gonna try and keep moving. Just the last thing is the pilot. We are offering a reimbursement, or maintenance reimbursement, which actually Transco, I know, is already spending to bring WAVs and their fleet back online that were down for maintenance issues. And then that $1,000, it's basically a sign-on bonus if they are able to recruit new drivers, which we also think is really important to improve WAV service. That I would think that'd be pretty attractive. And so they agreed that they have to do a certain amount of service after starting to keep that bonus, but trying to grow the pool of actual drivers, because we need the vehicles and the drivers to improve the service. So that's what we have planned. That's already just getting started. Yeah, so that was it. We just have the AAC contact information here if anybody else is interested in joining that. So maybe we don't have to monopolize your whole MAAC meeting, but we have those monthly or every other month, maybe, Faye knows, and would love to have any of the MAAC members attend.
Cool. And we really appreciate you coming in, and also for some of the commitments around starting to measure and post more data. And I know the secret shopper is something that we're also super interested in. We just want, the purpose of our committee is just to get folks around safely, reliably, acceptably. And there's a real breakdown, and when it happens, it's particularly bad. So we really appreciate your partnership. And please just keep us posted as things roll out. There's the carrot approach that you're taking. Seems like it's great that you're innovating and trying to figure this out with us, or figure out with the entire community. So please keep us posted. And Naomi and Kelly, anything else on your end that you wanted to bring up?
I think it would be great to have a concrete update in a couple of months,
Yeah,
including the metrics we talked about. I think that would be very helpful.
Yep, we can do that.
perfect.
I would like to provide my case number. Can I just put it in the chat? Because I just went back and looked again for my complaint from October, and the day that I got an email that it was being investigated was the same day where I got an email saying that it was resolved. So can I just follow up with you about that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, I just actually, Jonathan, I copied you on that. I just sent a message to our complaints manager and specifically asked to look up the complaint and let Jonathan and I know about the details and why it was closed and like what research they've done. So we're already on it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Cool. All right. Well, Faye and Jonathan, really appreciate both of you coming to our meeting. You're welcome to stay. Yeah, we'll definitely, we're working on our schedule. We'd love to have you back in a few months, kind of, you know, figuring out where we go from here. But and yeah, we'd love to see some more metrics and public dashboards, et cetera. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Perfect. Okay, great. So moving on to our agenda. Next up, daylighting data collection walkthrough. So Neo, can you walk us through? Basically, we want to start collecting data on where there are violations, just so that we have kind of a concrete, like mappable data set. So when people see illegal behavior, we can also just kind of start capturing that, both illegal behavior, both on the part of the government and also on the part of people, just so that we can start mapping out a need of, okay, there's like, this is unsafe, this is unsafe, this is unsafe, and this is illegal, and this is illegal, and we can start to build out a map, and we can start to disseminate this to the general public, and whenever we go out, we can start documenting. So Neo, do you want to take over here?
Sure thing. Sorry, my computer's just being a little slow. So of course, because I think one of the things we want to make sure as we're asking people to start reporting these violations is by providing at least a definition of what daylighting is. So a very simplified version of what is daylighting, referring to the practice of keeping intersections and crosswalks free from obstructions. And so we'll go ahead and get started on the survey, which thankfully is a very short one. So we start off by asking individuals to answer who is breaking the law. And so we have the option, of course, because government vehicles usually have that they are government or stating that they're both. So we'll just go with both for right now.
Yeah. Yep. And what we'll do is we'll also provide a little bit more about what the actual law is. So 40 feet from intersections, 25 feet for crosswalks. And that's definitely something that we want to add. I think this is, for now, like, we can just start providing this just within ourselves and kind of see and do it a couple times ourselves. And then we can change this form up so that, like, then we can kind of broaden the scope, so we can start, you know, emailing this out to everyone so that we can get kind of a broader data collection. But yeah, go for it now.
Thank you. And of course, asking for their service request ID and providing a little bit of information of how to find that ID from the 311 app, if that is how they are requesting, if that's how they're putting in the request. So this is just a sample one that we found. And then we have, bear with me. So then we have different options that you can put in that does speak to the laws that Karthik was stating about, like the distance from a fire hydrant, from a driveway, et cetera, et cetera. just to provide more context about like what was the safety violation. Here we go. And then we do require that they add in photographic evidence of the parking violation. Generally, if they say no, then it ends the survey. If they say yes, then they have the option of submitting an image that they have available. I know that on the 311 report, they don't have to put in an image. But we want to make sure that we do have, in addition to collecting the data, that we're also collecting photographic evidence of the violation.
So yeah, so basically kind of once we start having this, like, you know, ideally I have a feeling, I mean, just like walking around, I could, you know, do 8 of these like in, you know, a 2-block radius. So so I think you know, once we get going, I think this we could fill up a map pretty quickly, at least in certain pockets, just to, you know, just to show like, hey, this is the extent. And every one of these violations is, you know, potential crash and, you know, death or injury waiting to happen. And that's I think this is just like a, you know, just taking the next step of like, okay, like DDOT doesn't want to do this themselves. Like we need to show and make public like the extent of, you know, how dangerous this is. So
Just
yeah, that's
question.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of keep this survey on my phone handy when I'm out and about. And then, but before doing it, I should do a 311 complaint and then put that number. Gotcha.
Because, and the reason I think this is important is that like 311 is going to go into the ether, and like we can't, there's not even a good way to actually say like this is the daylighting, that like this is either an illegal sign placement, like there's, I think it's like, you know, road sign requests, like that's not actually what this actually is. So road sign requests or no parking anytime, like and that doesn't capture the dangerousness of the situation. And this way we can kind of very specifically say, okay, yeah, it was submitted in 311, but you know, like we can come back to it, you know, 3 weeks later and say, okay, there's nothing done here. So there's some raised hands. Go for it. Ashton, do you want to kick off?
Sorry, 2 questions. When we're submitting 311 requests, what bucket would you like us to submit under? Does it matter, or should we just put it under whatever one we think is closest, knowing that if we put it in something, it very well might be closed without incident? And then 2, do you want us to keep track of the, like, how do we then, if there's, you know, oh, it was closed without comment, or it said it was resolved, but it wasn't, you know, how do we capture that? And then the other, I guess the third question is, if it's not an infrastructure, but if it's a driver parked in a place where they shouldn't be, I didn't catch the full list of things. Do you want us to capture when that happens too, regardless of whether or not the infrastructure does or does not meet the requirement?
Yeah, good questions. So the first question is, and I think we want to explain this better in the survey itself, but the first question is, who's actually breaking the law? Is it the government itself that's breaking the law by putting the sign in an illegal place? Or is it someone, the sign is placed correctly, but someone is parking beyond the sign, obstructing and violating the law that way? Or both? Both could happen. Both the sign can be misplaced and the car could be breaking the law too. So those are kind of 3 different scenarios, and I think what we should do is actually make images of all 3, so that like on the survey itself, so people can see. And then like the idea is that we can just put this on the website. Like we'll just put like you know, these, and these particular, like every one of these reports will go up on our website and say, okay, there's a violation here, government's breaking law here, someone was there's a perpetrator breaking law on this side, like and now we'll have this map, And then I think that you actually raise a good point on, following up. Maybe we can have another form on, okay, you had a closed resolution, or you had a 311 request that was closed. Was the thing actually resolved, yes or no? And then we can actually go back onto the map and add that detail of, okay, 3 weeks later, this particular 311 request was closed, saying that work was done, but actually didn't solve the problem or whatever. But oh yeah, sorry, Lakeisha, you had your hand up.
Well, you kind of touched on some of the things that I was going to suggest, because from the government's perspective, the first item, it just says government, and then it's a government, a driver, or both. And I was wondering if there's going to be an indicator to say, explain more, or even, but you spoke about it further along the line that's going to be an option, because for us, we would like to know, because we're also doing something to capture the data electronically to look at accessibility concerns and 311 requests, as well as things that have been repaired or have addressed and resolved. So we're going to be able to track that going forward with our real-time data systems that we are capturing. So this will be helpful, but if you could pinpoint in there or let them specifically identify the issue and explain so that we can understand it too. And maybe in addition to the 311, you all would send or provide a report to us on a monthly basis of what you all collected, so that we can also assess, because some 311 things may get closed, to you all's point. And we from Equity and Inclusion would like to know what has been sent from the MAAC, or it may be not reported to us. So just kind of like a QA/QC check between the both of us. We are all working ultimately for the same goal here, to make sure that all accessibility issues are resolved and we know what is out there. So just was thinking along those lines.
Yeah, no, that's super. Yeah, I think, and actually, having the 311, I think it should be a mandatory field for us. That way we can tie it back to anything that you guys can look at it. So yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit of iteration to get this right. But yeah, 100%. That's super. So that's on daylighting. We'll send that out.
Because I think it might have gotten lost. So when we submit the 311 request, is there a specific 311 request bucket that we should all use, or should we because sometimes it's like, okay, it's a parking violation. Other times it's a corral request. Other times it's like, there are different ways that you can. And I feel like if you say that it's a parking violation, it's very easy for them to just close it, because when they get there, 10 hours later, the car is no longer there. And so it's not like the most, I don't know. I'm just curious what you all think the 311 request we should use is, and if it should all be the same so that it's easier to track and we know that it's being routed to the most effective place.
Yeah, I think so. The government breaking law, that's the sign. That's the DDOT wants us to do a road sign. So we should put, like, if the sign is located in the wrong place, then that's a road sign. But if a car is breaking the law, make sure you capture a picture and put that in, because even if it was gone and DPW goes and it's closed out, because that's a DPW enforcement thing, that is something that we can actually show evidence to DDOT and say, hey, there's, like, even though the sign's in the right place, there's still people that are parked here. Like, we need to put some sort of barrier there, some flex post or whatever, to make sure. And they've done that before. It just, but if there's not a barrier, and we can say, okay, it's not just a possibility of a car. We actually know there was a car there before. So just file that as a parking enforcement, no parking anytime, in 311. But let's keep this discussion alive, because I think this will be very useful. Like, we're going to iterate on this for sure. This is definitely not the final state of the survey, but we'll send it out to members so that we can kind of make that better, and then hopefully have a final process next month.
Kelly added a question in the chat about maybe also a picture of the vehicle plate. I think in the
100%.
that will, thank you very much for flagging that, Kelly.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's on daylighting. We're a little bit time crunched, so definitely want to just see if we can address a few other things. I want to bring up this concept of a time tax. And basically, it's this idea, and I've done a little bit of analysis, and I wanted to just get general buy-in here. The very short version of this is that it takes people longer if they don't own a car. So basically what I did is some geographic analysis, and I took there are 46 advisory neighborhood commissions, the sub-ward designations, or sub-ward geographies, and I took the middle of those as a fancy way of saying that as a centroid, and I measured how long it takes with Google, how long it takes driving versus transit. So for example, if you take the middle of 8A, of ANC 8A, and the middle of ANC 2B, driving takes 18 minutes, transit takes 52 minutes. And because, anyone who's not a driver, anyone who's either too disabled, too poor, too young, or too old, they've got to pay this time tax of 34 minutes. So if you're trying to get from 8A to 2B, you have to spend 34 more minutes of your life just getting from point A to point B. So if you look at all of these, there are 2,070 combinations, and in both directions. So it ended up being about 4,000 total routes. And that number is 2.67 if you take the average. So it takes nearly 3 times as long to get anywhere from point A to point B on transit than driving. And I think this is why, and I think the kind of reason I want to start using this metric is that it's not like, we can say, hey, bus lanes are important, but there's not really any standard as to why they're important. We can say it makes it more accessible, but I think here, this is one way that we can say for a fact, like, is it true that you are prioritizing, that it's okay for people who are outside of cars to spend 2.67 times as long just getting from point A to point B? And at the end of the day, like, time is all that we have in life. Kind of said another way, you're valuing the lives of people who are too poor, too disabled, too young, or too old at less than 30% of people who are driving. And this gets even more kind of ridiculous. Some of these differentials are 8 times. And it's also bad for drivers as well. Like, when we're in a car dependent system, people who can choose to drive will drive because it's the shortest way. And then buses will get stuck behind them, transit slow, people choose cars, and then we're in a car dependent system. And it's just a metric that I hope that I wanted to present and show, because I think this is a way that we can really start to show, hey, this is why the system is so deeply inequitable, and why we need to change, why we need why we've got our certain principles of we need bus lanes and sidewalks, and like why this is so important that, like, our status quo is so broken and what we need to do to fix it. So I wanted to just get like 2-second thoughts on that, because that's something that I'm hoping that we can bring up with the director at the next meeting.
That's amazing, Karthik. Can you share that around, or can we, if we have time, look at it more at the next meeting?
100%.
And one quick question is, do we have any like comparative, like what it might be in New York, or I don't know, someplace that has better transit?
Yeah.
Us, but maybe even like, I don't know, Stockholm. I don't know,
Yeah.
not necessarily domestically, but someplace that has really good transit. Some examples, because I feel it, like it takes me an hour to get anywhere.
Yep.
I'm like,
I'll look for that for sure.
That? Yes.
Yeah. And then ultimately it just makes us all worse off. More on that. Topics for DDOT director discussion, we can take that by email. I wanted to put the time tax on that discussion. wanted to also, yes, go for it, Zach.
Hey, I was just going to ask if I could get those topics by like the 21st, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah. We'll send those. We'll start to circulate those. Yeah, absolutely. DPW follow up. So Susie, have you heard anything from Susie?
I haven't.
Zach, or-
And the DPW director, there's a new director as of this Monday, so that we'll still work on that. But
Got it. Okay, cool. And actually, have you heard from Susie? Because I know she hasn't been at meetings for a while.
Not about the MAAC in particular. She's still with ODR, but
okay. Got it. Okay. And then wanted to also just set up, so we had talked about setting up subcommittees. You know, there are lots of capital projects. I wanted to just to set up 2 subcommittees on places and places that I'd like to kind of dig in. One on South Capitol and one on the downtown transportation plan. So these would be meetings where they're not during the meeting, but at a separate time when other folks. So anyone who wants to join can join. But this is just a way for us to like just test out how it can work, where we can start to review capital projects. So so these 2 subcommittees, I wanted to just get action, just to say like, let's see how this goes. And then we can kind of define the structure later. But so how do folks feel about setting up these 2 subcommittees? Cool. So Naomi, cool. Naomi, how do you feel?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'll make a motion to set up these 2 subcommittees, one on South Capitol Street capital project and one on the downtown transportation plan. So I'll need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. So it's unanimous. So we'll set up these, and we'll see how it goes. I think we can be fairly. I kind of want to just see how this goes. Unfortunately, we don't have time for general public discussion today. What we will do, though, for DDOT topics is we'll send out an email and we'll get those to you by the 21st, Zach. So we've got DDOT director at our April meeting, and then for our May meeting, really hoping that we can get DPW and then move on from there. But for other members, any thoughts, questions, concerns before we adjourn? I know we are over time, but definitely want to make sure that we've covered everything that we can today.
One quick thought. It was great that Lindsay Hill joined, and I'm wondering if she would be interested in joining a future meeting where we can talk about visitors with disabilities getting around the city and anything they're hearing that we should think about and work on and maybe partner with.
Great thought. Lindsay, what's your thought?
Yeah, I really enjoyed sitting in on this. This was fantastic, and I'm happy to help wherever and speak on whatever provides information. And I have some other organizations I'm going to dig in a little deeper into as well. So thank you so much.
That would be fabulous.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back. Great, cool. Anything else from anyone before we adjourn?
So, Catherine, this is Ron, if I may. I'm just very interested in the time tax. Well, the whole meeting was great, but I'm very interested in the time tax. But the question that I would ask, and I wonder if you're going to explore with that, if everything taking 3 times as long to do, how are folks using that time? You know, so I mean, if it's taking you longer, whether you're on public transportation or doing rideshare or something like that, how are you utilizing that extra time? Because it may not necessarily be a waste of your time if you're using that time differently. Let's say if you're using that time to catch up on something else or to talk to your sibling or your parents or, you know, something like that. Because those are the things that we don't always get to do, because when you're driving a vehicle, all your attention is should be focused on that driving. So I'm just interested in that. Is that going to be something that that you will explore with the time tax?
So actually, it's just about options. So so basically, it's like if someone is too poor, too young, too old, or too disabled, they don't even have the option of driving. So that's where it's like they're forced into, you know, spending extra time, and because they're forced into that, they may not be able to take that job, or they may not be able to go to that school, or they may not, you know, they might be late, you know, consistently. Like these are it's really about just like kind of what you know, what the systemic barriers are, just for people to get from point A to point B. They don't have the option of driving. And if we've built our city around driving and around cars, we're kind of systematically disenfranchising and making you know, making our transportation system inequitable.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming. This will conclude our March meeting for the Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council. Please come back to, you know, we're going to have a great meeting in April. We'll have the DDOT director here, and also, you know, have a great discussion and make some progress on making the city kind of more accessible for people with disabilities. So thanks so much for a great meeting, and we will see you next month.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.